I'd like to welcome you to Chapter 2, Your Inner Drive. I really love this chapter because it deals with something that we all sometimes have or don't have, and that is motivation. So, what is motivation? It's the direction and intensity of one's effort. So, we want to consider three orientations. The first orientation is participant or trait-centered view. In this one, many times you hear comments such as, oh, that person is a real winner. Or you may hear somebody say, oh, they are such a loser. And those are terms that you don't want to use when trying to describe someone because we want to make sure that we understand what it represents. So for participant or trait-centered view, its motivated behavior is primarily a function of individual characteristics. So you, as a student, it's going to be related to who you are as a person. Then you have situation-centered. And this is where the motivation level is determined primarily by the situation. Consider a class in college. Imagine you're taking a physical activity course and you're taking an aerobics course. Well, if you're not interested in aerobics or that type of exercise, you may not be highly motivated. But maybe you're more team sport oriented. So let's say that you take a competitive sports situation. Then your motivation level may be high because you prefer to be in that type of environment. So we're all going to be different. We have different things that we prefer. Think about your lecture courses. You may like courses where there's group discussion and you spend time talking to classmates. Whereas some of you who may be more introverted and may prefer to do things on your own, that type of class may not be what you prefer. And then you have the third view, and that's called the interactual review. And that's where motivated behavior results from the interaction of participant factors and situational factors. So, a combination of the first two. And this is the one that is most widely endorsed by researchers. So let's examine how the two interact. This chart gives you a better understanding of how those two come together. It helps determine motivation. And this is important as a leader. You will need to understand personality as well as situations involved. And this can help create a strong working environment. So let me share with you a research study that was done. In this research study, there were 78 participants. And they were participating in the 200-yard freestyle competition. And in this competition, they performed as an individual, and then they also performed as part of a team. So the situation was you were either an individual swimmer or you were a swimmer on a team. So you see the top two categories. You see alone and then you see on a team. Now, the personal situation here is are you more social approval or are you more social rejection? So you see on the left, you see approval oriented, and then you also see rejection threatened. So as you look at this chart, notice what happens. The individual who is more approval oriented, they are going to do better on a team environment because they are motivated by trying to not only get the approval of their teammates, but to show their teammates that they can perform at a high level. That type of individual may work best on a team, but what if that person is rejection threatened? In other words, they don't want to disappoint someone. They don't want to put someone down because of their performance or how it impacted a team. That individual may be better suited for an individual competition. So what does this all mean? One of the things we have to keep in mind as it relates to motivation and as it relates to different personality types is that the four fastest swimmers don't always make the best team. The thing we have to consider is each individual characteristics of the participants on your team. And sometimes when you're putting a team together, these are factors that you have to consider. So in this class, most weeks we will talk about one or two theories related to the topic that we're studying. I tend not to talk about a lot of theory because most often students can become confused by theory and our discussion of it. For motivation, the one that I chose that I want to discuss with you is achievement goal theory. The other theories for motivation are need achievement theory, the attribution theory, competence motivation theory. So as you can see, as it relates to motivation, there are many different theories that some people believe in, whereas others may not. And so you have a wide variety. As we look at achievement goal theory, there's two categories that I want you to pay attention to. And that is outcome goal orientation and task goal orientation. Now, let's use a race as an example. Imagine there were 5,225 participants. And overall, you finished 871st. And imagine in your gender category, you finished 560th. So how would this person respond? Well, let's look at the two categories as it relates to achievement goal theory. If you are outcome goal oriented, you compare your performance with and defeating others. So someone who was outcome goal oriented would probably look at those results and say, man, I did really bad because 870 people did better than me. Whereas if you were task oriented, and notice the definition, improving relative to one's own past performances. Maybe in a previous race, you finished 3,450th. But in this one, you finished 871st. Someone who's task-oriented would see the improvement and see how far they had come and probably would feel really good about their overall achievement. So here you see an example of how the two come together as it relates to achievement goal theory. You have achievement goals. We talked about the two types, outcome and task. Also, we want to combine that with our perceived ability. Okay, is it high or is it low? Combining those factors results in our behavior, and that's going to be related to performance, effort, persistence, and task choice. So understanding individuals that you're working with and what makes them tick and what's going to help them perform at a high level is super important for you when you're in a leadership role. So there's 3 stages of developing achievement, motivation, and competitiveness. The first stage is called the autonomous competence stage, and this typically occurs before the age of 4. In this stage, one is going to focus on self. Typically, when you put children together, they are going to focus on what they are doing. Most often, they are not going to pay attention to the people around them. They're going to be more focused on what's happening in their environment. In this stage, it may be related to a child wanting to learn to ride a bike. They're going to do everything in their power to get better so that they are capable of riding a bike. In stage 2, you have the social comparison stage. Now look at the age of this stage. Typically, this happens at the age of 5. Why is that important? Because that's typically when children begin kindergarten. And when they begin kindergarten, now they are surrounded by peers, and they start to pay attention to what's going on around them. And so that leads us to the final stage, which is integrated, self and social comparison. In this stage, you want an individual to understand when it is okay to compare and contrast with others. If a child was to compare themselves to others at all times, they may not feel very highly of themselves compared to what they see in the environment. But understanding that it's okay to compare, but to also know that one should feel confident in who they are as an individual is important. And what's really important to understand about the integrated phase is that there is no set age for when this occurs. So as you work with individuals, as you're helping someone in regards to their overall development, it's important for them to know how, as they look at their own personal motivation, when it's good or when it's okay to compare themselves to others, but also to when to contrast what's happening with that individual. So here's a picture of what's happening in those phases. In phase 1, you have the child learning to ride the bike. Stage 2, maybe starting kindergarten, they start to compare. And then the integrated stage, here you see an example of someone doing a fitness test. And if you remember those days of fitness testing, often you would have a score and you would compare yourself to someone else. Now, understanding that it's okay to compare yourself. For example, say we're doing a sit-up test and my partner scores a 45 and I scored a 26. Now, if I compare myself, I could be extremely upset because of the difference between our scores. Or I can compare it to what I did before in regards to my previous score, and maybe it was a previous score of 10. So I could feel confident knowing that the improvement occurred. So now let's talk about some of the questions for discussion for this chapter. Again, since we're not together, you're not having an opportunity to discuss this with your classmates, but you do have an opportunity to discuss these questions with people in your life. So the first question that I want you to consider is, what is a possible result of low motivation? So let's look at a few of these. Motivation can be complicated and change over time. That's important for us to understand because it shows that it's always evolving. So number 1, it affects your desire to train. So for example, with me, if I am training for a half marathon, if my motivation level is not high, it may be difficult for me to get out of bed and go for a long run. If I'm not training for something, maybe I don't have an end goal, my motivational level may be low in that situation. It can be a strain on your relationships. Think about the relationships that you're in. If you are not motivated in a relationship, what typically happens between you and that individual? It can also knock you off course. One day becomes a week. And as you start to miss things, it can start to increase in regards to what's happening in regards to your motivation. Number 4, make you feel like you can't handle the obstacles you encounter. Imagine taking a test. You go into a test that you're not prepared for, your confidence level is going to be relatively low. And so you want to make sure that you're prepared so that motivational level is high. It can cause you to barely have enough energy. If your motivation is not there, you tend to see a decrease in energy level. It can stunt your creativity. It can affect how you feel about yourself, maybe as an athlete or even as an individual. And then it can affect your overall enjoyment of sport. So remember, something that's very important for you to realize as it relates to motivation is that in all phases of life, you have to take breaks and you have to pull yourself away so that you don't lose that enjoyment, so that you don't lose that inner drive, and so that you always have something that keeps you moving forward. Now, in your assignment for this week, you were to interview 3 people. And what I'm sharing with you here were the most common responses that we typically receive for question 1. And question 1 was related to, why did you participate in sport? And the majority of the people who have answered that question said this. They wanted to improve skills. They wanted to have fun. They wanted the social aspect of being with friends. They want to experience thrills and excitement. They also want to achieve success and develop their own individual fitness level. As you can see, one of the major motives of participating in sport is not to win. Winning is a byproduct of the other areas that they find most important. So why do individuals want to exercise? Typically, they'll join a gym for the health factors, for the possible weight loss, for the increase in fitness, just for the opportunity to challenge themselves, and they just want to feel better. But what's going to help them continue? It has to be fun. They have to like the people that is instructing them. They also have to enjoy the activity, and the social impact has to be there. They have to enjoy the people that they're with. I'm part of a running group, and part of the enjoyment of being in a running group is the people that I run with. They make the environment fun, and we always have a good time.